So we got Errol Spence facing off against Chris Algieri this Saturday. I've made a video about this previously and I stated my opinion on how I see the fight going. And my opinion hasn't changed. I am most definitely and certainly picking Errol Spence to win this fight. A lot of people have said they're not yet convinced about Errol Spence. They say that he's got a leaky defense and what have you. And I agree. He does have a leaky defense. His defense has been leaky in several fights. He's been getting caught with right hands particularly. But one of the reasons why I think he's been getting caught like that is because he's so offensive-minded. He's so aggressive. His mind is always on hitting his opponent and not worrying about what's actually coming back. And to me, that's a flaw which can be fairly easily corrected. It's not that Spence has got poor punching technique or swings wildly or don't keep his hands up. He don't tend to do any of those things. He tends to have, good technique. His stance is good and all that type of stuff. But because he's thinking about offense so much, he switches off defensively. Okay, he's not thinking about what could come back. I think when he's in there against a guy who he fears, I mean, obviously it's not good to be doing these kind of things, even at any level. Okay, it's always good to tighten up your defense and be mindful of it all the time. But I do feel that when he steps up in competition, and if you got in there with somebody like a Keith Thurman or a Kell Brook or a Sean Porter, I don't think he'd be as defensively reckless. That's just my personal view. I don't think he would be. I think he would tighten up. Similar to Deontay Wilder. When Wilder was scheduled to face Deverne, everyone thought, oh, he's going to get knocked out. He throws all these wild shots. And my whole take on it was, look, he's got Mark Breland in his corner. Mark Breland was an extremely accomplished amateur, world champion as a professional, a cronk fighter. He's training Wilder against Deverne. He's not going to have Wilder go out there and go all guns blazing. He's going to have Wilder use his natural attributes and be a lot more defensively responsible against Bermane Stiverne. And that's exactly what happened. And I feel the same with Errol Spence. When he fights somebody where he feels some type of fear, or his team feel like this person is someone that you need to be worried about, then I think he'll be a lot defensively better than we've seen him. But again, that remains to be seen. As far as this fight here with Chris Algieri, why am I so convinced that Errol Spence wins this fight? Well, first of all, I'm actually quite surprised that there are so many people who are actually picking Algieri to win the fight. That's a surprise to me. There are also other people who think Spence will win, but they think Algieri will give him a very, very tough time. This seems to be mostly based on the fact that Algieri was able to give Amir Khan a tough time. Now, what I will say about Algieri is that under John David Jackson, he has been able to add a few wrinkles to his game, as the way I would say. When he was back down at 140 pounds, like welterweight, he was primarily a mover. In fact, a lot of people were proclaiming him to be the new Paulie Malignaggi. That's how people saw him, just a stick and move guy who don't really have any power, but has speed. And we saw against Provodnikov, he just stuck to his bike, stayed on his bicycle for 12 rounds, sticking and moving. The same against Pacquiao, even though he was dropped several times, he was just sticking and moving the whole fight. Then he changed trainers, joined John David Jackson, and really finally came up out the cage, as his previous trainer was telling him to do against Pacquiao in the corner. He finally came up out the cage against Amir Khan, and he boxed a totally different fight than we've ever seen him box before, which is a front foot pressure fight. And that really took Amir Khan, and I think most people watching, by surprise. He proved himself to be quite adept at pressure fighting in that particular fight. However, even though Amir Khan is very accomplished and all that, I've always said this, Khan lacks natural physical strength, in my opinion. Always has. Most of the guys who have tried to impose themselves on Amir Khan physically have ended up being physically stronger than him. In fact, I'm struggling to think of anybody who tried to impose themselves on Khan who didn't end up being physically stronger than him on the inside. So Khan is just not a naturally strong guy. So that's why Algieri was able to do what he did. And a lot of people feel like Algieri maybe won that Khan fight. Errol Spence is naturally much bigger than Khan and much, much physically stronger. I'm not saying that Errol Spence is necessarily a devastating knockout artist. I don't think he is, but I think he has heavier hands than Khan, stronger, and he's more effective at imposing himself upon you. He's a very good body puncher, Errol Spence. That's one of the most impressive things about him. He's a southpaw as well, obviously. He's a very good body puncher. Now, there are clips of him out there going to the body against people, against Van Heerden and a few other guys. And people have noted that, well, those guys were standing still. They were stationary targets for Errol Spence to get his body shots off against. Whereas Algieri's going to move. He's not just going to be a stationary target. Well, actually, if you watch some of those Errol Spence fights, some of those guys were moving. A lot. But Errol Spence slowed down that movement with the body shots. He took the movement away. That's what's so impressive about his body attack. And as far as Algieri, we don't know what Algieri's approach is going to be in this fight. Maybe he's going to have a couple feeling out rounds where he's going to see what Errol Spence's power is like and test the waters, so to speak. And then based on that reconnaissance mission of trying to find out exactly what is there, he may decide to either box or engage with Errol Spence. You know, depending on how he feels his strength is and his power is and how the angles are, he may decide his game plan on the fly. And him and John David Jackson may have actually decided to come into the fight with that in mind. I don't know. I just feel like no matter which way Errol Spence approaches the fight, he's going to lose. Not Errol Spence. No matter which way Algieri approaches the fight, he's going to lose. I think he can make it a bit more awkward for Spence if he gets on his bike. I think he may maybe make it a bit more awkward, but Spence loves coming forward. And when Algieri's on his bike, it cuts his power down even more. And he's not a big puncher to begin with. But if he comes forward against Errol Spence, he's, again, playing to Errol Spence's strengths. Errol Spence would love a guy to stand right in front of him because Errol Spence can tuck up with the earmuffs on and start ripping shots to the body. Now, we saw against Manny Pacquiao, again, you have to keep in mind that against Pacquiao, he stayed on his bike for 12 rounds. But against Pacquiao, he did seem very open to the southpaw left. And Errol Spence, for those of you who don't know, is a southpaw. But that's at long range. Up close, I don't think the southpaw stance matters as much because up close, when you're on the inside, the shoulders tend to square up more. Certainly in the case of Errol Spence, the shoulders square up more, and it's not much different than fighting an orthodox fighter when you're in that position. But as I say, Spence is very good with the body shots. I think he's a much better inside fighter than Chris Algieri. Better combination puncher, hits harder. He's probably going to be physically stronger. We'll see about that. But, you know, Algieri did seem strong in his past couple of fights, especially against Khan. But I expect Errol Spence to be stronger. Yeah, I just see Errol Spence winning the fight. What can I say? As far as how far Spence can go in the division, I do think he's going to be one of the top guys at welterweight in the years going forward. People have said that if he was to fight Kell Brook anytime soon, they think Brook would beat him. I agree. If he was to fight him right now, maybe Brook would beat him. But I believe Errol Spence is Brook's mandatory, and that mandatory is not due for quite a while now. Think about a year. In a year's time, I may well be sitting here picking Errol Spence to beat Kell Brook. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how Spence develops and how his career unfolds. But at this stage, if I was handling Errol Spence, would I want to put him in against Kell Brook next? Like in, let's say he beats Algieri in 3 months' time, would I want to put him in against Brook? Not really. Nah, not if I was handling him. I would want to give him more time. But we'll see how it goes. Let me know in the comment section below how you see this Errol Spence-Chris Algieri fight going. Are you picking Algieri? Or are you just thinking that Algieri's going to give Spence all he can handle? Or are you picking Errol Spence like me to win in convincing fashion? Whatever the case is, drop your comments in the comment section below and let me know. All right? It's your boy Hatman, I'm out.